This is a video presentation of Bible 2114, Unit 4, entitled The World of the Bible, Archeology. Your speaker is Roy Hayden. As a result of this unit, the student should be able to answer questions concerning 1. The definition of archaeology, 2. Reasons for settlement in a particular place, 3. The process of archaeology, 4. The value of pottery, and 5. Several sites which have illuminated biblical events. Archaeology is the study of ancient culture. It illustrates history and depends on history for much of its interpretation. Archaeology is a helpful tool for the study of the Bible, for it deals with cultural remains such as architecture, art, artifacts, that is man-made materials, and epigraphic finds, written materials. What appears to be a natural hill in this scene is not natural at all, but is what is called a tell. This is ancient Moreshet. It is a flat-topped, artificial mound built up through the centuries by the accumulation of successive cities, one built on top of the other. Ancient houses were generally built of mud, or brick and fieldstone. When such houses were destroyed by fire, earthquake, or war, only the lower part of the walls would be preserved, because the falling debris of the roof and upper part of the walls would bury the lower sections. If other people later settled on the same site, they would merely level the spot and build on top of the old remains. In the course of centuries, this process was repeated several times, so that literally many cities were heaped one on top of the other. A tell can generally be distinguished from a natural hill by its flat, level top and steep, symmetrical sides. But the question must be asked, why did people pick this site to build a city in the first place? And why did others build on the same site? The last question is fairly easy to answer. Later settlements were built on the same site for the same reason it was inhabited in the first place. The first question may have several answers. A primary reason for building a city in a particular place is water. This is the Old Testament mound of Jericho in the center of the picture, and the spring of Elisha is immediately to the left in the dark green area. Elisha's spring is still the main source of water for the city of Jericho. It flows clear and cool in a region that may experience temperatures of 115 or 120 degrees in the summer. Megiddo may have been picked for its strategic location. It guarded the pass through the Carmel Range. Megiddo is the brown speck in the center foreground. A modern road follows the old route through the same mountain pass. Sometimes a site combines several reasons, such as this site of Beth-Shan. It was a strategic site for the control of the valley, which was part of the main route leading from the Jezreel Valley across the Jordan to Mesopotamia. Thus, it was also on the main trade route. Yet, it also had excellent soil for agriculture around it. Beth-Shan was occupied by the Canaanites, the Philistines, the Israelites, and later by the Romans. The Roman theater can be seen in the upper left corner. After an archaeologist has picked the site he wishes to excavate, he will generally lay out a grid from which to work. This shot shows Bir es-Safadi, a Chalcolithic settlement at Beersheba, after conclusion of the excavation. The grid is clearly visible with the box between squares still in place. Each 5-meter square appears as a room in a large complex. This ground shot of Tel Najila shows the small cement blocks which mark out the 5-meter squares. Already walls of ancient structures appear in several of the squares, and some continue under the box. If the archaeologist wants a complete picture of the structures, then the box will have to be removed. Ideally, the way to excavate would be to peel off the layers one by one. However, this would take too long and would be too expensive. This was tried at Megiddo, but the project was given up after several years as impractical. A quick way to get an idea of what to expect on the mound is a trial trench. This is such a trench made in a tell in the Negev. The diagram shows how the various levels are distinguished and how various objects help to establish the different periods of occupation. The evidence consists of various artifacts: pottery, masonry, houses, jewelry, coins, and ostraca. The most ancient level of occupation is at the bottom of the tell, the most recent at the top. In digging from the top down, therefore, the archaeologist is reading history backwards. This trench was cut at Beersheba in an attempt to discover the defensive system of the city. The project was very successful. The archaeologist must be careful to keep accurate records of everything found in the excavation. Even the walls of the Bach contain much useful information. Different colors of soil indicate various occupation levels. In the lower right corner is a chalice, still in situ. All finds are photographed in situ, that is, in the position in which they were found, before they are removed. The exact position is also recorded in the written records. Much of the time of the archaeologist is spent with paperwork. Periodically, each area is photographed. This scene shows the expedition photographer at Tel Najila on a ladder photographing a square. The director of an expedition must have a complete team of technicians available: photographers, surveyors, draftsmen, ceramists, supervisors, and many workmen. Often the latter are made up of university students and volunteers. In the first stages of the dig, picks, mattocks, and other heavy tools are used, such as those in front of the buckets. But often it becomes necessary to abandon the heavy tools for smaller and lighter instruments, such as those on the right, the small hand pick, trowel, and whisk broom. This workman is using a small trowel and is cleaning up an area. Note the broom on the left. The dirt is placed in the bucket and then is carried to a wheelbarrow or by hand to the dump. Note the walls in the picture. Only the lower part remains, and the large Bronze Age pottery fragments just to the left of the workman's hat. These students are working in the Byzantine bath area at Tel Kasila. The bucket in the right foreground contains pottery fragments. The one on the left is full of dirt. The worker in the upper right is using a mattocks, similar to that seen in the left center. Note that the wall of the bath is beginning to appear around the worker on the lower left. Most of the pottery found is broken, but many whole pieces are also found. These were excavated in the Herodian section in the Old City, Jerusalem. Many of the pieces are lamps. All pottery is kept, washed, and sorted. Groups of pieces from the same area can sometimes be restored into whole vessels. Here at the Pottery Restoration Workshop in Arad, workers are busy trying to fit the pieces back together. 2 large pots have been partially restored. This type of work takes considerable skill and patience, and the progress is extremely slow and difficult. The importance of pottery in the study of Palestinian archaeology cannot be overestimated. Over the past decades, it has developed into a highly exact science and is, for the modern archaeologist, the main basis of dating. After the pottery has been cleaned, each piece is given a number which identifies it as square and loci. An experienced archaeologist can date the age of a fragment within a relative time period and can immediately determine the age of a whole jar within a few decades. Every student of Palestinian archaeology must spend much time on the subject of pottery. Another valuable artifact found by the archaeologist is ancient currency. Long before stamped coinage came into existence, lumps of metal or metal rings were used in the ancient Near East for money. These coins are Greco-Roman. The bronze ring was found in northern Mesopotamia and dates from about 3000 BC. From an ancient inscription, it is known that this bronze ring was equal to 2 cows in value. With a quick look at the process of archaeology behind us, let's take a look at some of the sites in Israel and see their relationship to the Bible. This is an aerial view of Gezer. Gezer was an important city in the southwestern part of the country. It is located midway between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Gezer was given as a dowry by Pharaoh to Solomon. In this scene we can see the remains of the Solomonic Gate. 3 cities were built by Solomon on the same plan. They were Gezer, Megiddo, and Hatzor. All have this type of gate. The Philistines had occupied Gezer before the Israelites. Remains of a Philistine house are shown in this picture. Again, note that just the lower part of the walls remain. A close-up of the area where the woman is working reveals a charred beam. You will see this in the center of the picture at the base of the wall. This is an indication that the house was destroyed by fire. The Israelites occupied the site after Solomon received Gezer from Pharaoh. The pillars are remains from an Israelite house. Some brick walls are preserved in the background. Most important for our study is the Solomonic Gate. This view is from the inside looking out. The 2 figures are standing between the 2 outside towers. A water drain is visible in the center of the picture, leading under the gate and out of the city directly under the figures. On either side of the entranceway are 3 rooms. The figure is standing in the 2nd room on the left. Much of the business of the city took place in the gate of the city. Students are sitting in some of the rooms. Each room has a bench on 3 sides. Perhaps in a similar gate at Bethlehem, Boaz carried on his business with the next of kin of Ruth. When the angels arrived at the city of Sodom, Lot was sitting in the gate of that city. Absalom, when he planned his revolt against David his father, would stand beside the way of the gate of the city of Jerusalem. The 2nd city fortified by Solomon was Megiddo. This had been an important city for centuries. It was mentioned many times in the Amarna age and figured prominently in the Bible. The site was extensively excavated by the Chicago Oriental Institute from 1925 to 1935. At least 25 occupation levels have been discovered. Megiddo was one of the most important Canaanite cities in the north of Palestine. This is a Canaanite temple area dating from the Late Bronze period. Note the large round altar. In this shot, the steps leading up to the altar can be seen at the left center. A pillar base is visible in the lower right. Also at Megiddo are the remains of a Solomonic Gate. Dr. Anson Rainey points out one of the significant features of the outside towers. The towers stand presently to a height of over 10 feet. Hatzor was a large Canaanite and Israelite city in Upper Galilee. It is mentioned in the Egyptian execration texts and in the Mari tablets, where it is referred to as a center for the caravans that traveled from Hatzor to Babylon. In the Bible, Hatzor features prominently in the account of the conquests of Joshua. The Israelite city occupied only the bare spot on the center right. The Canaanite city of the Late Bronze Age covered the whole area in the center of the picture. A large moat and glacis went clear around the 120-acre site. fine artifacts were found at Hatzor. This is one of the large storage jars, commonly called a crater. This shrine was found in one of the temples. Both public and private temples have been excavated, and this was in a private temple. The basalt slab in the center right served as an offertory table. The middle stela has a relief with two hands upraised toward the sign of the moon. Also at Hatzor, Solomon built fortifications. The gate is in the foreground, and the casemate wall visible on the left center. Of all the cities Joshua captured, Hatzor is singled out as one he burned. One of the tasks of archaeology is to try to identify biblical sites. Debir is mentioned in connection with Caleb and Othniel. For many years, debate has gone on about the location of this city. The Bible says it was formerly called Kiryat Sefer. The site of Rabud, shown here, has been recently suggested as Debir. Some of the present occupants of the city live in homes built into caves. This is the outside of one such home. Inside are a few primitive pieces of furniture. This site came to the attention of archaeologists when a number of whole pottery pieces began to appear in the antiquity shops of Bethlehem and elsewhere. They were traced to this place. The local inhabitants had discovered a number of graves on the hillside dating to the Bronze Age. The contents were being robbed and sold in the surrounding towns to tourists. The finding of pottery from this age caused scholars to take a closer look at this site. When the local inhabitants were asked where they got their water, they designated a place in the wadi about 2 miles away, where there are 2 subterranean chambers fed by underground sources and tapped by well shafts through the bedrock. This is the uppermost of those wells, this known as the upper well of the leach, and this is the lower well of the leach. These 2 water sources accord well with the account of Caleb granting such additional water sources to his daughter Aksah. Near Rabud is this sheepfold. This illustrates well the ideas expressed in the New Testament by Jesus. Note that the entrance is on the far side. A shepherd could easily position himself in the entrance and thus become the door of the sheep. Mount Gerizim was mentioned in the account of Joshua and the renewal of the covenant. In this scene can be seen a sheikh's tomb on the right, and in the center the remains of a Byzantine church. The Samaritan holy place is out of the picture to the left. The Christians and Samaritans continually fought during the Byzantine period. The Emperor Zeno drove the Samaritans from Mount Gerizim around 486 AD and ordered a church to be built there. This was destroyed by the Samaritans, and the Emperor Justinian rebuilt it around 530 and surrounded it with an enclosure. Excavation on the summit brought to light the foundations of an octagonal church with an asp and a narthex to the west, and part of Justinian's enclosure. According to archaeologists, the Samaritan temple was located on this tell at the end of the Gerizim Ridge. The Samaritans, however, do not accept this, and they celebrate their feast of Passover nearer to the location of the church. At the foot of Mount Gerizim is the city of Shechem, the ancient capital and religious center of Samaria. Shechem is the spot where Abraham first stopped to build an altar in the Promised Land. Pictured here is part of the Cyclopean Wall, so named because of the huge boulders out of which it is made. The wall dates to the end of the Middle Bronze period. Here is the gate of that wall. Massive towers stood on either side. The original gate had 3 massive piers which formed 2 pairs of rooms. The same gate was rebuilt in the late Bronze Age, and again a half-century later a new gate was built in conjunction with a new wall. At Shechem, the 12 tribes renewed the covenant under Joshua, and it was here also that Jeroboam led the people of Israel to reject the offer of King Rehoboam, thus causing the division of the kingdom. It may have been in this temple area, with its matzabot, or standing stone, that the covenant renewal by Joshua took place. Several details in the chapter are of special interest to the archaeologist. Reference is made to a great stone, an oak tree, and a sanctuary of Yahweh. The stones shown here may have been similar to the one referred to in the book of Joshua, even if it is not the very one. But even that is a possibility. We may even ask if this is the sanctuary of Yahweh. No mention is made in the Bible of how Shechem became an Israelite city. The Israelites merely moved in, and it is possible that Israel used the late Bronze Age temple for her own cultic purposes. In this aerial shot, the large wall is on the left side with the gate in the upper left. The large square building in the center may be the temple. Immediately to the right of the building, in the oval bare areas, are the matzabot, or standing stones. Samaria was a city built by Omri and his son Ahab. In this scene, the hill of Samaria is in the middle of the picture. Omri bought this hill from the original owner and built a new capital for the northern kingdom. In this close-up of the tell and the excavations, the parking lot and Herodian Basilica is on the left in the large open space. To the right is the Hellenistic Tower and Roman Theater. On the right is the remains of the temple Herod built in honor of Augustus, and immediately behind it are the ruins from the Israelite period. In this closer view, the temple of Augustus is on the left. Steps lead up to the platform. The palace of Omri and Ahab is to the right. Not much remains from the Israelite period that can be seen by the visitor. Much was learned in the excavation, but as is the case in most excavations, little is left to give any idea of what the city was like. Note the masonry beside the figure. This is an excellent quality of work. In the lower course of masonry can be seen the style of building that is called the header-stretcher method. There are two long stones with what looks like a small square stone between them. That square stone is a block which is set in the opposite direction and serves as a binder to tie the wall together. Omri probably employed Phoenician craftsmen to do his work. Near the headwaters of the Jordan River is the site called today Banyas. Here the beautiful clear water flows from the Lebanon Mountains and Mount Hermon into the Dan River. This lush and scenic area was in the hands of the Syrians before the War of 67. It is hard to imagine how clear and cool this water is if one is used only to the muddy Jordan below the Sea of Galilee. Excavations have been going on for some time at this site. The tribe of Dan migrated from the southwest, the territory near the Philistines, and settled in this northernmost part of Israel. Here also Jeroboam set up one of the golden calves, by which he made Israel to sin. These steps were found in the excavation at Dan. The city had a long history, at first called Laish, but changed to Dan by the tribe of Dan. The city was destroyed several times, even though it had massive fortifications. During the 1968 season, remains of a building similar in construction to the remains of the palace of Omri and Ahab in Samaria were found. Near Dan is the headwaters of one of the tributaries of the Jordan, and the place where the god Pan was worshipped. The inability of most Arabs to pronounce the P is the reason the place of Pan is called Banyas. Presently the spring issues from the rock at the right side of the pool. The spring used to come out of this cave in the center, but an earthquake changed the flow of the spring. To the right of the cave are several niches, some with inscriptions. The large niche on the left was dedicated to Pan. Some think that it was near here that Jesus asked his disciples who they thought he was. Peter replied, that he was the Christ, the Son of the living God. On the shore of the Sea of Galilee is the site of Capernaum. Here in a synagogue, Jesus read from the prophet Isaiah and told the people that that day the scripture was fulfilled in him. This close-up shows the 2nd century synagogue on the right, and the newly excavated house of Peter is the hexagon to the left. Foundations and wall supports are visible in the so-called house of Peter. Dating from the time of Christ, this house has been connected by the archaeologist to the biblical reference of Peter and his mother-in-law. The synagogue itself is 2nd century, but is built on the site of a much earlier synagogue. The place for the women was in the balcony of the wall, still standing. The men sat in the lower section, probably along benches on each side of the room. This carving may be a replica of the ark in which the scrolls were kept. Perhaps the ark was mounted on wheels and was rolled to where it was used in the synagogue. Not far from Capernaum is the site of Chorazin. The beautiful Sea of Galilee can be seen in the background. The synagogue of Chorazin can be seen in the center. Jesus had said, "Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! If the miracles that were performed in you had been performed in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes." Little remains of the synagogue of Chorazin. The black basalt rock from which the synagogue was built was also used to build the houses of the Jewish town nearby. It seems that the town was in ruins by the early 4th century, probably destroyed by an earthquake. In this unit, we have tried to define archaeology as the study of ancient culture. Several reasons were given why a group of people would settle in a particular place and why other people would later settle in the same place, thus over the centuries building layer upon layer of occupation into the impressive tells that dot the landscape of the Near East. Something has also been said about the method of archaeological excavation, the value of pottery, and the necessity of keeping accurate records. Several sites were picked to illustrate the relationship of these sites to biblical events. This has been a presentation of Bible 2114, Unit 4. This is the end of the tape.